My sister made the worst birthday surprise. She's pregnant. With my husband. I never imagined my own birthday dinner would become a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My name is Sarah, and I was turning 28. I had spent weeks planning the perfect evening, just close family and a few friends. My husband, Mark, was supposed to be there, smiling across the table, the man I trusted more than anyone. My younger sister, Rachel, was also invited. She and I had a complicated relationship, part love, part rivalry, but I never thought she would do something so cruel. The house was full of laughter when the evening began. The smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread filled the air. Candles flickered on the table as I made a toast to the new year of my life. Everyone cheered, and for a moment, I felt like nothing could go wrong. But then Rachel stood up. She cleared her throat, her voice trembling just a little as all eyes turned toward her. "I have an announcement," she said, forcing a smile. "I'm pregnant." There was a beat of silence, then polite congratulations floated around the room. I smiled, thinking, good for her. But then she dropped the bombshell that shattered everything. "And the father, it's Mark." My breath caught. My heart slammed against my ribs like it wanted to break free. I looked at my husband. He avoided my gaze, his face suddenly cold and distant. "You're lying," I managed to say, voice barely above a whisper. Rachel shook her head, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't place. Triumph? Guilt? Or maybe something darker? "No, Sarah. It's true." That night, the birthday party turned into a battlefield. And my life, it was never the same again. The room felt like it had suddenly shrunk, the walls closing in on me. My breath was shallow, my mind racing to catch up with what I had just heard. Rachel, my little sister, the person I had shared secrets and childhood dreams with, was now standing in front of me, confessing to carrying my husband's child. The weight of her words hit me with the force of a tidal wave. Mark, my husband of 4 years, avoided my gaze completely. His face was unreadable, like a stone wall that refused to crack. For a moment, I couldn't even find the strength to be angry with him. Instead, I was drowning in shock and confusion. "What? How?" My voice trembled, barely audible. "When?" Rachel shrugged, almost casually, as if dropping a bombshell like this was no big deal. "A few months ago. Before you and Mark had that fight." I felt like the floor beneath me was crumbling. I glanced at Mark, desperate for any sign of denial, remorse, or even anger. But he was silent. Too silent. The rest of the family was frozen. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw tightened. Nobody said a word. The festive atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by thick tension. I wanted to scream, to run, to demand answers, but all that came out was a broken whisper. "Why, Mark? Why would you do this to me?" Mark finally looked at me, his eyes hollow. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Then what was it supposed to be?" I hissed. "A secret you both kept from me? While I trusted you." Rachel stepped forward, voice soft but resolute. "Sarah, I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "Happened? You think that excuses this? You slept with my husband, and then you expect me to believe it was an accident." "Please, Sarah," Mark interrupted, voice low but urgent. "Let's not do this tonight. We can talk later." But I wasn't done. "Later," I repeated. "There is no later. There's only right now, and the fact that my own sister betrayed me on the worst night of my life." The tension exploded like a powder keg. I stormed out of the room before anyone could stop me, my hands shaking, tears burning my eyes. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, but it didn't calm the storm inside. I needed answers. I needed to understand how everything I built, the life, the trust, the love, had crumbled in a single moment. And most of all, I needed to decide what I was going to do next. I found myself pacing the small balcony just off the living room, the city lights blurred beneath the night sky. My chest tightened with every shallow breath. How could Rachel? How could Mark? The faces I had trusted most had turned into strangers overnight. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling as I scrolled through old photos. Moments frozen in time. Rachel and me laughing as kids, Mark and me on our wedding day, full of hope. Was it all a lie? My phone buzzed, a message from Mark. Sarah, please. Can we talk? I want to explain everything. I stared at the screen, rage and heartbreak warred inside me. Was there anything left to explain? Or was this just damage control? I ignored the message and went back inside. The party was over. Guests had quietly slipped away, some casting worried glances in my direction. My parents sat silently in the living room, their faces etched with disappointment and confusion. Mom reached for my hand, her eyes moist. Sweetheart, we're here for you. But the words felt hollow. This wasn't just about me, it was a betrayal that split our family in two. I decided then that I needed to confront Mark and Rachel, but not tonight. Not in front of everyone. I wanted the truth, raw and unfiltered. I needed to know how this had happened, and why they had kept it from me for so long. The next morning, Mark called. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sat down with Rachel, who had stayed behind to help clean the mess. Her eyes were red, but defiant. Sarah, she said quietly, I never wanted to hurt you. But I love him. And this baby, it's real. I shook my head, disbelief twisting in my gut. You love him. You love my husband. After everything. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's complicated. It wasn't planned, but I can't pretend it didn't happen. I want to do the right thing. And what about me? I whispered. What am I supposed to do with the life we had? Rachel looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I'm sorry, she said simply. In that moment, I realized the road ahead would be long and painful. The sister I thought I knew was gone, and a storm was raging between the three of us, one that could destroy everything. Days passed like a suffocating fog. I drifted through the motions of life but felt like a ghost in my own home. Mark and Rachel avoided me, exchanging furtive glances that only deepened the wounds. My parents urged peace, reminding me of the importance of family, but how could I forgive when the betrayal cut so deep? One afternoon, unable to bear the silence, I confronted Mark alone in the study. The house was eerily quiet, the distant hum of the city barely audible. Why, Mark? I demanded, voice shaking. How did this even start? He ran his hands through his hair, eyes clouded with regret. It began when we were struggling. You were working late nights, exhausted. Rachel was there when I needed someone. It was a mistake, Sarah. One I regret every day. A mistake. I echoed bitterly. Sleeping with my sister while I was at home? You both betrayed me. He swallowed hard. I didn't plan for any of this. When Rachel told me she was pregnant, I panicked. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared of losing everything. I shook my head, tears spilling over. You lost me the moment you decided to keep it a secret. Mark stepped closer, his voice low. I want to fix this. For you. For our marriage. I looked at him, really looked, searching for any flicker of the man I once loved. But all I saw was a stranger, broken and ashamed. I don't know if that's possible anymore, I whispered. That night, I lay awake, memories swirling, laughter, promises, shared dreams, now twisted into shards of pain. The family I thought unbreakable was splintering, and I was left to pick up the pieces. But beneath the heartbreak, a dark seed of anger was taking root. I wasn't just going to be the victim. I needed answers. I needed control. And if they thought I would just forgive and forget, they were dead wrong. In the days that followed, I found myself caught between heartbreak and fury. My mind replayed every moment, the whispered secrets, the stolen glances, the lies hidden beneath smiles. But one question consumed me above all. How deep did this betrayal run? I knew I couldn't face it alone. So, in secret, I started digging, going through messages, emails, and even talking to people I wouldn't have imagined involving in this mess. I needed the full story, every detail they'd tried to bury. One afternoon, I confronted Olivia, Rachel's closest friend, someone I had trusted over the years. "Tell me everything," I demanded, my voice cold but steady. Olivia hesitated but then spilled what she knew. The late-night calls between Rachel and Mark, the hidden meetings in coffee shops, the moment Rachel found out she was pregnant and chose silence over truth. She told me about Mark's guilt, Rachel's conflicted emotions, and the web of deceit they'd woven around me. It was worse than I thought. But amidst the revelations, a darker truth surfaced. There had been whispers that Mark wasn't the only one with secrets. Rachel's pregnancy wasn't the only lie. "Sarah," Olivia said softly, "you should know, there was someone else. Someone you never suspected." I narrowed my eyes. "Who?" Olivia looked away. "Your brother, David." The name hit me like a punch. David, my younger brother, the one I'd always protected, the one who had stood silently by through everything. I needed to see him, to hear it from his own mouth. That evening, I found David in his small apartment. He looked surprised to see me, but not alarmed. "I know what you're thinking," he said before I could speak. "And yes, it's true." He confessed to a secret affair with Rachel, one that predated her relationship with Mark. When Rachel got pregnant, she had lied about the father, hoping to protect someone. But in reality, the truth was far messier. The betrayal was deeper than I imagined. And now, my family wasn't just fractured, it was bleeding. The revelation that David, my own brother, had been entangled in this nightmare shook me to my core. I sat across from him in that cramped apartment, the walls closing in as the truth spilled out like poison. "I didn't want you to find out like this," David said, voice heavy with guilt. "Rachel and we made a terrible mistake. We never expected it to get this complicated." I could feel the weight of years of secrets between us. "Why didn't you tell me? Why keep this from everyone?" He looked down, ashamed. "I was scared. Scared of hurting you, scared of losing my family. But I see now that hiding it only made things worse." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much pain this caused, but instead, I sat in silence. The betrayal wasn't just about Mark and Rachel anymore, it was everywhere, infecting every corner of my life. I left his apartment with a heavy heart, knowing that confronting one secret would only lead me deeper into the maze of lies. That night, as I lay awake, I thought about the family I once knew, the sister, the husband, the brother I trusted. They had all turned their backs on me, and yet, part of me still wanted to find a way back. But I also knew one thing. I couldn't be the broken one anymore. I had to find my strength. And maybe, just maybe, there was a way to turn this devastation into power. The days following the confrontation with David felt like walking through a storm without shelter. The family gatherings stopped, the phone calls dried up, and even the familiar corners of my own home felt alien. It was as if the foundation beneath me was crumbling. Yet, amid the wreckage, a new determination sparked inside me. I wasn't going to let this betrayal define me. If anything, it ignited a fire, a need to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my family. I began documenting everything: dates, messages, hidden conversations. I hired a private investigator to gather evidence about Mark and Rachel's secret meetings. It wasn't just about anger anymore. It was about protecting myself, about truth. One evening, I invited Mark and Rachel separately to the house for a conversation. Neither knew the other would be there. Mark arrived first, his eyes dull but hopeful. "I want us to talk," I said firmly. "No more lies." Before long, Rachel stepped in, her expression a mixture of defiance and fear. The room was thick with tension. I laid out everything I knew: the affair, the pregnancy, the secrets, and the betrayal. I showed them evidence of their deception. Mark's face twisted in pain. Rachel's lips trembled. "You both shattered my trust," I said, voice steady but cold. "But this isn't just about punishment. It's about deciding what happens next." Rachel broke down, sobbing. "I'm scared, Sarah. I didn't want to hurt you. I love Mark." "And what about me?" I challenged. "What am I supposed to do with that?" Mark looked at me, desperation in his eyes. "I want to fix this. I'll do anything." I paused. "Then prove it. Be honest. Start with the truth." For the first time, the walls they built began to crumble. But I knew this was only the start of a long and painful journey. The next weeks were a battleground of emotions, confessions, and raw truths. Mark began opening up in ways I hadn't seen before, attending therapy, answering questions honestly, trying to rebuild the fragile trust between us. Rachel, meanwhile, retreated into herself, the weight of guilt crushing her spirit. One afternoon, Mark invited me to a quiet cafe downtown. The soft murmur of conversation and the aroma of coffee filled the air, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Sarah," he began, voice trembling, "I know I've caused you unimaginable pain. But I want you to know, I never stopped loving you." I looked at him, searching for sincerity. "I was weak," he admitted. "I let fear and loneliness lead me astray. But you're the one I want to build a future with." I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I held them back. "Do you really believe that love is enough? After all this?" He nodded. "I'm willing to fight for us. If you'll let me." I wanted to believe him, desperately, but the wounds were deep. Back home, Rachel had moved out, leaving a silence that echoed through the halls. She left a note, apologizing and saying she needed time to figure out who she was apart from all this. My family was fractured. Some tried to support me, others kept their distance. I realized that the people I thought I could count on weren't always reliable. And yet, amid the chaos, I discovered something new: my own resilience. I was no longer just the betrayed wife and sister. I was a woman who refused to be broken. Weeks passed, and slowly, the edges of my broken world began to blur into something unrecognizable. The pain hadn't vanished, but I was learning to carry it differently, not as a burden, but as a scar that told a story of survival. Mark and I tried counseling. It wasn't easy. Every session dredged up memories I wished to forget, but beneath the tears and anger, there was a flicker of hope. One evening, as we sat across from each other in the therapist's office, I asked the question that haunted me most. "Why didn't you come to me sooner? Why keep everything secret?" Mark swallowed, eyes fixed on his hands. "I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of admitting how badly I messed up. I thought if I confessed, I'd destroy everything." "And did you?" His silence was the answer. At home, the quiet was a reminder of Rachel's absence. I found myself walking past her old room, empty now, filled with echoes. But then something unexpected happened. I received a message from her. "Sarah, I'm sorry for everything. I need to tell you something important. Can we meet?" Curiosity mixed with caution. Part of me wanted to run away from more pain. Another part wanted to hear the truth, whatever it was. When we met at a small park, Rachel looked different, older, humbled. "I wasn't honest with you," she said. "The pregnancy, it wasn't just about Mark or David. There's more you need to know." I braced myself. "What do you mean?" I asked. Rachel took a deep breath. "I was scared. The truth could tear us apart completely. Rachel's eyes searched mine, pleading for understanding. The truth is, she whispered, the baby isn't Mark's or David's. I stared, disbelief crashing over me like a wave. Then whose is it? I asked, voice barely audible. Rachel hesitated, then said the words that shattered the last of my illusions. It's yours. I blinked, stunned into silence. How? When? My mind raced. She explained, a night months ago when I was exhausted and Mark was away on a business trip. Rachel said she had come to me, confused and scared, asking for help. I had barely been awake, but in that vulnerable moment, things spiraled out of control. She said we'd both been drinking, the lines blurred, and I didn't remember. But the truth was there. This baby, growing inside Rachel, was genetically mine. The shock was overwhelming. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. All the lies, all the secrets, they weren't just about betrayal between my husband and sister or brother. They were about me, in ways I couldn't comprehend. And now, faced with this impossible truth, I had to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. Would I break? Or would I find a way to rise from the ashes? The revelation left me staggering. My own sister was carrying my child, a fact buried beneath layers of deception and heartbreak. I felt everything at once, confusion, anger, sorrow, and an aching tenderness I couldn't explain. How could this happen? I whispered, voice trembling. Rachel looked away, tears slipping down her cheeks. It was a mistake. We never meant for this to happen. I was scared to tell you because I didn't want to lose you or tear the family apart. I clenched my fists, the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume me. But beneath it all, a quiet voice in my mind whispered, this wasn't just about pain. It was about survival. That night, I sat alone in my room, replaying every moment of the last few months. The betrayal, the lies, the hidden truths, now all reframed by this impossible fact. I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could let this break me, or I could take control. The next day, I made a decision. I would face this head-on, not as a victim, but as a woman who refused to be defined by the sins of others. I started by telling my parents the truth. Their shock was palpable, but after the initial turmoil, they stood by me. Slowly, I rebuilt the fragile trust that had been shattered. Mark and I confronted the reality of our marriage. It wasn't going to be easy, but we chose to fight, not just for us, but for the child growing inside Rachel. And with that choice, I found a new strength, one forged in fire and pain, but unbreakable. As the weeks turned into months, the dynamics of our fractured family began to shift in unexpected ways. Rachel, carrying my child, was fragile but determined to make amends. I found myself grappling with a mix of protectiveness and resentment I hadn't anticipated. Mark, too, was changing. His guilt had transformed into quiet devotion. He attended every doctor's appointment with Rachel, and while the tension between us was still thick, moments of tenderness occasionally broke through. One afternoon, as I sat by the window watching the rain fall, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Can we talk? I need to tell you something important. I hesitated but agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. When she arrived, her face was pale but resolute. Sarah, she said, voice barely above a whisper, there's more you need to know. About the night about the baby. I braced myself. Rachel explained that that night hadn't been a simple mistake. There had been someone else involved. Someone who had taken advantage of both of us while we were vulnerable. Tears filled her eyes as she confessed. It wasn't just us. I was scared to tell you because I didn't want to drag you into something even darker. I felt a chill run down my spine. The web of lies was deeper than I imagined. And now I had to face a new enemy, one lurking in the shadows of our past. The name Rachel whispered next was like a dagger twisting in my chest. His name is Jason, she said, voice trembling. He's dangerous. I sat back, heart pounding. Jason, a man I'd never met but who had somehow slipped into our lives and shattered everything. Rachel explained how Jason had been lurking in the background, a manipulative figure who'd taken advantage of our weakest moments. He was the true architect of the chaos, pulling strings and leaving destruction in his wake. My mind raced. I had to protect my family, the remnants of it anyway, from this dark shadow. I decided I wouldn't wait for Rachel or Mark to deal with Jason. I would take control. I reached out to a private investigator, determined to uncover every piece of dirt I could find on Jason. If he wanted a war, he was going to get one. That night, I sat alone, a fire burning in my chest not just for revenge, but for justice. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I would fight, for myself, for my baby, and for the future that still felt uncertain but somehow possible. The family I thought was broken might just survive. The days that followed were a whirlwind of whispered phone calls, secret meetings, and shadowy surveillance. The private investigators' reports came in piece by piece. Jason was not just dangerous, he was criminal. Fraud, intimidation, even violence in his past. Everything Rachel had feared was true. Armed with this knowledge, I began to rebuild my defenses. I warned Mark, warned Rachel, we had to be cautious. Jason wasn't just a threat to us emotionally, but physically. One night, after a tense family dinner, I caught Rachel alone. "Promise me you'll stay safe," I said, voice low but fierce. She nodded, tears glistening. "I'm scared, but I know I'm not alone anymore." For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. And then, just when I thought we were gaining ground, Jason made his move. A threatening message slipped under my door. A simple note, "Back off or you'll regret it." The fight had just begun. The threatening note wasn't just a message, it was a declaration of war. Fear and adrenaline coursed through me, but I refused to back down. I was done being a victim. With Mark and Rachel by my side, we went to the police. The evidence we'd gathered was enough to put Jason under investigation. The law was finally catching up with the darkness he'd spread. It wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, arguments, and pain. But through it all, I found something stronger than betrayal or fear: forgiveness and resilience. Rachel's baby was born healthy, a symbol of hope amid the ruins. I held my nephew in my arms, a fragile miracle born from chaos but destined for love. Mark and I rebuilt our marriage, slowly and imperfectly, learning to trust again. And my family, though forever changed, found new ways to heal. I learned that even the deepest wounds could be healed with courage, truth, and a refusal to let darkness win. Because sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the strongest victories.